If someone were to ask Dusk what she'd been doing for the past week, she wouldn't know how to explain it even if she tried. How exactly did a person explain what they have perceived to be their entire reality have been completely fake? At least she thought it was fake. She honestly wasn't even sure, which even worries the part of the whole ordeal. That being the worst part was definitely saying something, considering the Fremantle witches had been manipulated the music charts with their magic to make Dusk's band famous. Even though the witches were safely detained into another dimension, Dusk and her friends were left wondering whether or not of the fame they've experienced was real. Considering a huge fan that they have gotten, not to mention that traveling the country sold out tours, finding out that none of it actually happened was quite really mind-blowing. Dusk's bandmates and best friends, Thorn and Luna, were more optimistic than her ever seemed to think it was real. Dusk, on the other hand, was a bit more cynical. Regardless of whatever the band received what happened or not, it was more definitive fact that nobody else remembered any of it. So what the fuck was the point on thinking what had happened was real if nobody else knew about it? They'd been in Nashville, and when all hell broke loose, the three witches that opened the portal that they turned ended up being sucked themselves. It was that they had faced a terrifying reality and it was all fake. Because of the timeline of the witches' manipulation had been erased, three bandmates and their manager Gus made the long trip back to their hometown Oak Haven, when the hotel they were staying at had no record of reservations they had booked. When the girls returned home, one of the first things they had asked people was that they really knew about the girls what they had been doing. The girls had been gone from Oak Haven for about a week for the tour, but given that had erased the fabric of their timeline, they had no idea where people thought they had been. The hard part was that they couldn't exactly ask, "What do you think I've been doing for the past week?" without sounding like they were loony. They had tried to dance around the question to see if anyone would tell them where they believed the girls had been. Thorn and Luna had reported that it was a bit harder to get out to their parents, but Dusk had a relatively easy job getting it out of Jack. The first thing he asked her was how was the week off writing music had been, and this struck Dusk as a bit odd at first. But apparently in this new timeline, everybody seemed to have believed the girls were gone because they'd taken a week off to focus on something music related. That technically wasn't wrong, since the reason for the absence was indeed related to their music career. Dusk supposed Sophia had right when she said, "I think you'll find the right things as they come as an attendant," which was her last remark before disappearing back into the alternative reality. It was strange on how the universe righted itself. The girls had been home for about a week now and needed several days of rest and relaxation. They were back at it trying to think of the next strategy to promote their album. After almost constant dose of the new sights of limelight, they were back to their dingy old apartment. At least it felt dingy to Dusk. Given the precious hotels that they'd been staying in the past week, back to the boring white walls, moodless furniture, and the broken heat and water pipes that the landlord hadn't fixed for months. The girls were just sitting down so they could discuss how they wanted to move forward. Thorn donned gray sweatpants and a black "I saw the ghost of Oak Haven and lived" t-shirt, which Dusk knew it had to be Thorn's favorite t-shirts given that she wore them all the time. Luna wore a purple top with black shorts, whereas Dusk wore gray trousers and a plain black t-shirt. Now they had to come up with a new strategy to continue promoting their first album, was the first single that was falling off the charts. Luna was just getting a glass of water from the sink before the girls all sat down to discuss the matter. "Hey, the faucet doesn't leak anymore," Luna exclaimed happily. "The landlord finally fixed it. It only took a complete timeline reset for it to happen," Dusk laughed. "Starting from the drawing board and from after performing sold-out shows from around the country, it feels a bit weird. It feels like we're starting over, but we're somehow in the middle of that process, because we're already famous, but now we aren't ever famous in the first place, if that makes sense," Thorn commented with a chuckle. changing the subject back to the reason the girls were sitting down in the living room for a chat. I mean, artists technically do that all the time after they've fallen out of popularity, so I guess we're not entirely alone, Luna said with a light chuckle. The only difference is that we're not famous anymore because of those witches. Lucky us, Dusk said sarcastically replied. That's a great way to think of it. Fawn responded before slightly changing the subject. How are you doing things, Luna? I know you were thinking whatever you wanted to still be a part of the band. Finding out last month of our lives didn't really happen because it's been jarring on all of us, Luna said with a chuckle, which had a hint of anxiety in it. I'm still processing everything, but as of now I'd like to stay in the band. I'll keep thinking about everything though. I mean, we're not exactly starting from the drawing board, Dusk chimed in. We're just trying to figure out what single second, now that Hex Girl has fallen off the charts, which one of us doesn't think that Earth, Wind, Fire, and Air for some reason. Well, I personally think Love's Curse would be a better choice. The lyrics are more similar to Hex Girl, and it's more catchy and repetitive. I think it would fit perfectly along with the other songs that competitively hit the radio, if that were to aim promoting the single again, Fawn argued. Luna said. She paused for a moment to fully formulate her response. I put a curse on you does sound very similar to I'm gonna put a spell on you, but I would argue that it's almost too similar to Hex Girl. It did pretty well, but if you were wanting something more successful, putting out a song that's super similar to the last single is just going to mirror the same results, right? Although the guess, I don't know if we were speaking at number 26, if it had anything to do with the witches. Luna looked a bit unsure herself, but Dusk quite honestly thought through thinking was incredibly sound. Releasing such similar lyrics to the first single would certainly cement their status as unpopular. Luna's right. Artists who try to copy their first single over and over again end up getting long-term success. If Hex Girl couldn't get above 26, then this was for sure as hell isn't going to do anything. If anything, the similar lyrics are just going to make people think trying to get famous by imitating our first single, Dusk rebuked. That does have a fair point, Fawn nodded, looking like she was processing on how to move forward with her initial plan that had been debunked. How do we know that releasing something isn't going to lead to flopping? Dusk didn't agree with Fawn's point, but she did exactly know how to disapprove what she said earlier. I mean, we really don't get it. I still argue that taking a risk is better than just playing it safe and releasing a popular like our first album. Regardless of the first single peaked early from the supernatural manipulation, at least something different. There is a chance it'll become popular, Luna added. Dusk was admittedly a little jealous of how eloquent that had worded her idea. It sounded much better than we really don't. Dusk will never admit it, but sometimes she felt like inferior to Luna, who almost academically inclined to any of the girls. Although Fawn was close behind, Dusk, on the other hand, always struggled with a bit with school academics, where they're never her strong suit, and her parents, practically her father, unfortunately reminded her of it regularly throughout her high school years. Yeah, I guess that's it, Fawn nodded. Given that, I say Earth, Wind, Fire, and Air is probably our best bet, and it seems like to be a fan favorite at the concerts. We even had that one girl said it was her favorite. Dusk then believed she was referring to Susan, with the girl they met at the restaurant they stopped at, whom they seemed to give a free ticket to their concert when they realized that she was a superfan they couldn't afford the concert. Thank God we've got the obvious decision settled, Dusk teased. I guess we could just tell Gus the next time we see him. Yeah, we got a meeting with him at 2 p.m. this afternoon to brainstorm our promotion strategies, Luna reminded. We'll run it by him when we have his take. Dusk's mind had been swirling over since they returned to Oakhaven, so she had admittedly lost track of what day it is. She would never have thought that they'd been doing those planning meetings with Gus's office so soon, after the massive tour they'd been on. What was even more unsettling was that when she thought about it, those meetings with Gus were not that far in the past. They'd only been happening for a month or two before they left for the tour. but it feels like Gus's meetings have been a part of their lives for much longer than that. Dusk had really put all of her eggs in one basket on this tour, and this has certainly done let her down. Decade records look exactly as she remembered it. A modest brick office building with a neon light that read the name of the record label. It was nothing fancy, but what Dusk remembered most about this place was the hope and possibility that it represented the free girls. Dusk felt like it could have been felt a routine to return to Gus's office, but instead it felt incredibly jarring. The surroundings themselves were comforting and similar, but the idea of meeting with Gus basically started from the drawing board after achieving the world-famed sombering, to say the least. Is it just me, or does it feel fucking weird to be back here? Dusk inquired her two best friends as she shut the passenger side door to the soccer mom minivan. It's not just you, Thorne assured. It definitely feels weird to be back here, but it feels kinda oddly comforting. I was thinking the same, Luna interjected. I was kinda missed doing these while we were touring. It's so good to be back, even if the circumstances are weird. Dusk wished the same felt that nostalgia Thorne and Luna were talking about. More so, Dusk felt coming back here, without success they previously attained, somehow a failure on their part. Dusk knew that it was fucking ridiculous, and on how the hell they would have predicted free witches altering the fabric of reality. Still, her mind remained on the position of her ego, and she walked into the decade records feeling a bit insecure. Dusk looked up at the posters of famous artists on the wall. She remembered Thorne mentioning something about them, admiring the posters for the first time when she came in, wishing that she could be famous like them, and then feeling like she achieved her dream when her first album became popular. Dusk had never taken a closer look at the posters before, but looking at them now, she didn't really care about them too much. She presumed it was her imagination, but it felt like the pictures were all looking down at her, their noses at her. Bob Dylan wore a grin on his face that was almost superior. Bon Jovi's elated smirk was almost boastful as the radiance. She wondered on how the hell could anyone possibly be happy at the things that had fallen apart so disastrously for her. Robert Smith, at least, a friendly smile on her face, but her cynical state, Dusk felt that her smile pitied her, almost as if saying, "Don't worry, someday you'll be good as me." Dusk had to avert her gaze, realizing her frustration was getting the better out of her. Any sane person would know those posters couldn't judge people. All the judgments that she had projected onto these posters were actually just a reflection of what she thought of herself. A loser. This wasn't the feeling for the blonde. She thought of herself as long doing this had happened. The last thing that the girls made that made her feel important was the things feeling inside rise more to the surface. "Come on in, girls," the familiar voice of the band's manager warmly invited, as the girls arrived at his door. Dusk mentally shook herself out of the self-deprecating superior that got caught yet again, and followed her two friends into Gus's office. Thorne and Luna looked at the two gray leather chairs, while Dusk sat in the red leather chair. "How has your week been, girls?" Gus inquired. "Refreshing," Luna said, before thinking about her word choice a tad more, backtracking. "Well, mostly refreshing. I still haven't come into terms with the fact that we're entirely reality, knew it was fake. I'm not even sure if any of us will. I'm trying to think as to what it could have been like a move," Thorne said before Luna interjected. "Between timelines?" Luna said with a chuckle. "Yeah, I mean, like a big life change. Any major life takes a short mental adjustment. So I'm trying to think of that. For example, it was a pretty late change for all of us to graduate from high school and turn into a music to full-time," Thorne explained. "A pretty large change of $650 a month, not including the utilities, plus groceries and gas," Dusk snarkily interjected. "Well, I'm glad you're all adjusting to being back in Oakhaven as well," Gus stated before he saw the sullen look on Dusk's face, and proceeded what she just said. "Well, most of you." Dusk didn't want to say anything. She was feeling the type of moody when she didn't want to point others out that she just wasn't in a good mood. Because she was talking about how down she was would only put her in the worst mood. She was also feeling the type of moody where she was just jealous and bitter, as her other two friends seemed to be handling things much better to her. So as strange as it to say, I suppose we're going back to the drawing board. Have you figured out what you want to do now? Gus asked. We're talking about releasing Earth, Wind, Fire, and Air as the second single, Thorn informed. We are debating that between that and Love's Curse, but we've decided on the former. I agree that the best single choice, and I'm glad to hear you have finalized that. I could make arrangements for you to film a music video if you like, Gus offered. Well, it couldn't hurt, Thorn shrugged. Sure, why not? Luna added. Yeah, I think it's a good idea, Dusk nodded. When's the soonest we can record it? Thorn inquired. Looks like the studio's booked tomorrow, but we could get you in on Monday afternoon, Gus said. That's like right after our shifts, Luna points out. That'd be perfect. It's also up to you, but remember how I mentioned my friend at the Z-Pop in Ohio? Gus inquired. I could drop him a line as well and see if we can schedule a televisionized interview about making your music video. Now Dusk was excited. A trip to Ohio? She was already missing the traveling from the tour, so going on another state sounded like she needed to break out of her rut. That sounds wicked, Dusk exclaimed. Yeah, and it's a great way to spread the word about your new single, Luna agreed. It also helps to make sure people didn't forget about us too quickly after Hex Girl. Being on TV would position us as being relevant. So yeah, I'd say we should go for it, Thorn added. Excellent. I'll put a phone call in to my associate tomorrow and check and see if he's open to having you guys do an interview in their morning show. If he is, I'll try and see if we can get a millage request to have the station cover the gas to get there. I think this is the beginning of something huge for you girls. Gus smiled. Dusk didn't want to get her hopes up, not just quite yet. She felt like very quite elated that they already came up with the same game plan where to put themselves out there quickly. Surely following up their first single with a music video and television interview would promptly show the world that the Hex Girls were dedicated, passionate band were following. At least she hoped it would. Although they hadn't worked on planning up their next album yet, over the past few days the girls had still gone to each other's second jobs to put their shifts. They had originally gotten these jobs to help them pay for the car repair, but they stuck around after that when they realized how much help if they were to Thorn and Luna's fathers and Jack. Dusk would never admit it to be it, but part of her job still felt jealous that Thorn and Luna were able to work with their fathers, while Dusk felt like her father wouldn't give her a job, even if she was at the verge of losing the apartment. Dusk tried to shove the emotional pain from the strained relationship with her father down, as she focused on her current task in hand. Serving orders she just received. Alright, Thorn had the turkey sandwich, Luna had the tuna, and I had the burger with fries, Dusk said. She was carefully placed the entrees down at their booth at the custom front of the restaurant. Prior to the tour, it became a routine for the girls to gather around Jack's around 12:15 after finishing their shifts. However, Dusk's shift often went until 12:30 or even 12:45 to give Jack some extra help with the lunch rush. Thankfully today the girls' order was the last one, and Dusk was able to sit down and enjoy a meal with her friends. How was your shift? Luna inquired. Decent, it was pretty quiet today. Thankfully, which is unusual for a Friday, Dusk remarked. Anyway, what do you want to do for the music video? If we're filming Monday, we've got to get this planned first. Luna and I were actually talking about while you were serving at the other table, Thorn replied, as Dusk sat down. She took off the pink apron she wore over her waitress uniform, both what she hated. She didn't enjoy dressing overly girly. Also, wearing a pink apron over her waitress dress was pretty much frequent torture for her. We were thinking of asking Gus if we could film it somewhere out in the nature, Luna said. Something that would accommodate the environmental lyrics of the song. Oh, Thorn exclaimed. Her green eyes lit up as she brainstormed the idea. What about that old walking trail in the woods near the park? There's a lot of trees and bushes there. That's a wicked idea, Dusk agreed, getting the idea of her own. Maybe if we can have it similarly to Hex Girl, and we start the video with some old, out-of-touch dude who hates the environment, and then it was some anti-environment stuff, we could start singing the song. I like that, Luna said. Almost like our song would be an angry response to his comments. Yeah, I think that's a good concept for the music video. Our first single was pretty generic, but this cement would be eco-goth image. We've talked about wanting the band, Thorn nodded. At that moment, Dusk noticed her boss, Jack, coming over to see the girls. He donned on the white button-up shirt with the gray dress pants. Hey girls, what are you working on today? Jack joyfully inquired. We're working at brainstorming ideas for our second music video, Thorn informed. That's wonderful, Jack exclaimed. Which song is it for? Earth, Wind, Fire, and Air, Dusk answered. Ooh, that's always been one of my favorites. What a great choice for your second single. Jack smiled. I'm glad your girls are releasing another video. You seemed a lot happier today, Dusk. If you don't mind me saying so, you've seemed a little down lately. Dusk immediately felt embarrassed, but not only because Jack was saying was true, but she had been feeling quite down and depressed lately. She didn't really want to be invulnerable and to admit to anyone. No, I'm fine, Dusk rebuked, with a hint of coldness present in her voice. Just a little tired, that's all. We've been working really hard on the music video and planning our rollout for our second single. Oh well, I better let you girls get back to it, Jack exclaimed. He then headed back towards the kitchen. Once Jack was out of earshot, Thorn and Luna glanced back at Dusk, wearing the befuddled looks on their face. We just started out the music video today. How could you be tired? Thorn asked with a chuckle. That laugh was not mean, but Dusk could tell it was merely an attempt to playful with her friend. However, Dusk was already annoyed by Jack pointing out that she'd been down, so she wasn't in any kind of mood for joking. Oh, shut up. Did you want me to really tell him I've been feeling down because we're famous in an alternative reality? But now we're not? Dusk snapped. Not exactly, but Jack does have a point. It's been super weird to adjustment to Luna too, but you seem pretty depressed lately, in a different way than Luna and I seem to be, Thorn pointed out. Is everything okay? Yeah, I guess. Just sucks that we're not famous anymore. It feels like everything we've done up to this point was for nothing, Dusk sighed. I get that, but I mean, we did release a whole album to our song, got up to number 6 on the charts, Thorn mentioned. Even if we didn't become the hottest bands in the world, it's still pretty great to accomplish. Not everyone could do what we did. Dusk was getting defensive now. Does any of that matter if nobody knows who we are? Oh, Dusk, Luna let out a sigh. Being famous was cool and all, but the band music should always be the most important thing. That superficial fame junk was the whole reason I was considering leaving the band in the first place. It should have always been making music that makes something to us, rather than just doing it shows for fame, Thorn added. I hope you feel the same way. Dusk admittedly did not. Even though she could see where Thorn was coming from, she wished that they could just make music that they love, but as her dad always told her, doing something what you love doesn't mean anything unless you pay the bills. Sure, it was working out fine for them now with part-time jobs, but Dusk still didn't want to be a waitress for 5 years down the road. She wanted to do something with her life that would make her successful and happy. Just as big F you to her stupid father, who always said that she never take anything down allowing her passion, because it was so-called hobby. She didn't feel the energy to explain to Thorn right now, but she uncharacteristically replied, Yeah, I do, you're right. It wasn't robotic, defeated voice, so she had an idea was believable, but it seemed to shut Thorn up, and she was glad about. She wished that they were privileged enough to live in a utopian world like Thorn and Luna did, where they didn't have to worry about making their parents proud of them, and had the freedom to explore the career and chose something else with Dusk's parents. It already felt like they could enter out the world, even when she made the attempt to becoming famous writing songs. Dusk wanted to prove their ignorant asses wrong. Dusk carefully parked the soccer mom van in their usual spot. It was next to a pine tree planted on the small grassy area opposite side of the recording label. She had been just rejuvenated after the weekend, given the fact that she'd gotten to relax without any obligations. The girls hurried inside Decade Records to Gus's office, eager to begin filming. "I can't wait to hear what Gus thinks of our music video idea," Thorne exclaimed as she knocked on the office door. "Come on in," the manager instructed. Gus was usually pretty joyful, but his tone today sounded a bit more elevated than usual. "Hey, Gus," Thorne greeted. "Hey, girls, I got incredibly news for you, as well as the idea you bounced off," Gus informed. "I made a call to my friend at Z-Pop, Ohio, and he wants to have you on the morning news on Wednesday for an interview to announce your next single. Not only that, but he also asked if you'd be willing to do a live performance." Dusk felt a sense of elation surge through her body. If they not only wanted an interview, but a live performance as well, the station would be confident as the band was enough for an up-to-corner to justify giving them such a prime slot to perform their album. Nobody's didn't make these announcements for their next single on television. If they could get other networks to want to come and interview them, maybe this could be the thing they needed to become popular again. Dusk realized that perhaps getting a bit prematurely carried away, but her excitement was just quite justified. "Whoa, that's incredible!" Dusk immediately exclaimed. "We should definitely do this," Luna chimed in. "I'm with you both. Tell them yes," Thorne agreed. "Excellent. I am so glad you girls like the idea. That would mean we'd be traveling up to Ohio tomorrow morning. It's an 11-hour drive, so we need most of the day for drive each away. And we would have to stay at a hotel on Tuesday night. You okay with that?" Gus questioned. "For sure," Luna enthusiastically answered. "Yeah, it'll be kind of much of a shorter version than what we were doing on a tour," Thorne commented. "Heck yeah," Dusk exclaimed. "Just as long as the label's paying for it." "Yes, the label will be paying for this," Gus informed. "I also bounced the idea of you groovy goths. I have planned for the video today. But what do you think about filming it on Wednesday in Ohio? It'd be no extra cost to us." "That would be incredible." Dusk's eyes lit up. Casually filming a music video in another state felt like something only big-time artists did, so it was quite excited by this idea. "Yeah, we like to plan on doing it at the park, but we could probably find an even nicer one there," Thorne remarked. "What city are we going to?" Luna inquired. "The city of Crystal Cove, Ohio," Gus smiled. "It's a small but quaint little town with a kind of a spooky history. There are legends in the town of ghost sightings and supernatural activity. However, I believe it's just a tourist gimmick, but it fits the image of the band perfectly. Hopefully there's no repeat of this little recent otherworldly adventure," Thorne chuckled, the hint of nervousness in her voice. Dusk didn't feel practically nervous, as the towns came up with the gimmicky crap like this all the time just to attract visitors. Besides, she didn't believe in any of that superstitious nonsense, so she didn't see any real reason why just because of the recent experience with witches trying to bring people back from another dimension. "I shall make the call and get the preparations for the place for a trip. I'll plan to pick you up girls at your apartment at 6 a.m. sharp tomorrow morning. That will get us there by 5 p.m., Gus informed. "Thanks so much for being amazing, Gus. We would have never thought you would have found anything credible for us this quick," Luna smiled. "Well, I highly think of you girls. You're amongst one of the most talented bands I've ever worked with. So I want to do everything I can to give you all the opportunity an amazing group like this it deserves," Gus smiled. "Hopefully this trip was the beginning of the amazing things for you girls." "Man, I can't believe it. I just know it's going to make us famous again," Dusk said it all. "Just don't go and let it get to your head this time," Luna teased. Luna's words immediately made Dusk feel a little bad, but she learned her lesson from the last time. She knew there was a close separation of fame and friendship needed to be prioritized over fame. She was stupid and selfish for even thinking of making that comment that their friendship might be affected if Luna left the band. Dusk considered not saying anything in response to Luna's remark because it made her bad, but she realized that it might be further worrying her friends might still not fully let go of the fame-crazed mentality. She needed to speak up and make it clear that it was done prioritizing fame over friendship, even if she strongly desired the fame again. "I won't, trust me. I've learned my lesson," Dusk promised. I treated you all terribly, and I'm sorry for that. I realize now that friendship comes first always. Well, good, Thorn smiled. And I thank you so much for everything, Gus. We'll see you tomorrow morning. I'll be there bright and early, Gus exclaimed, as the girls got up from their leather chairs and began heading out the door. Dusk completely stared at Gus's hopes for the band. In their opinion, publicity like this was just what the band needed to gain popularity. She knew if things stayed the way they were now, the girls would face an obstructity if they didn't prove the world that they were Hex Girls were here to stay. As far as Dusk was concerned, what exactly was there going to do?